Hi guys, this is Sunday Remedy and my name is Peyton.
I'm Rachel, and we're back with Jenna with Salt and Souls today. She is a really incredible person, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hey there, my name is Jenna Morcos, and I'm the owner of Salt and Souls. I never thought I would own a business, and here I am.
Isn't that usually how it goes?
Yeah.
Okay, so Jenna, you own Salt and Souls. What was the inspiration? What inspired you to start there? And especially since you are a pharmacist, correct?
Correct. I think I always knew that I would do something other than pharmacy. I just never really knew what it was, but I've always had a passion for wellness, holistic stuff, just personally. I would venture into that for my own self care. So I kind of knew that's where my passion was, more so than just, I don't know, doing the pharmacist daily grind. But it really wasn't until I had this amazing pharmacy job. And it's one of those things where I felt like I was supposed to be doing something different, but why would I ever leave this amazing job that I had? And then it closed on my 50th birthday. It was like the
Oh my
last day
gosh.
was literally on my 50th birthday. So I was like, well, isn't that funny? I just think sometimes when you don't listen, they sort of just close the door for you. They, as in
Yeah.
God, universe, powers that be. And I found humor in that for some reason, but I still didn't know what it was that I was supposed to do. I just started to think more and more about the salt room in Asheville that I would go to that I absolutely love, that has played like a huge role in just my well being. I kind of just joked around over the last 10 years, like, well, maybe I'll open up a salt spa in Charlotte. And you're always like, haha, that's never going to happen. And then I just started to really think about it, and all these ideas started coming, and I was just getting flooded. Like, I would lay in bed at night and just get flooded with ideas, and I just started to write them down, and that turned into a business plan. So before I knew it, it was like I had to kind of make that choice. Like, am I going to try it, or am I just going to stay on the path that I was on? And it was honestly one of those gut feelings where I was like, I can't not do it.
So this is like so interesting because it's such a big jump and there's nothing like you're the first to kind of do this in Charlotte. We don't have
Right.
a lot of salt therapies.
I think for me, it was that I absolutely loved the salt room, and I every time one would open up in Charlotte, I would go try it out, and they're all right, but I wasn't getting what I was wanting. And so I would end up sitting in these salt rooms not really relaxing, because I'd be making my mental checklist of, well, if I were to open up my own, this is what I would do. I would keep this, I would not do that, I think it should have this, it would be nice if it was that. I think that's kind of also where my business plan came. But then you have to get practical. Like, how would you actually make a salt room? Who makes a salt room? How much does it cost? Can
Yeah.
you, what would you charge? What would the profit be? Is it a sustainable business? So you kind of I started to research all of that stuff. I started to research other salt spas. I started to research the days they're open, what services they offer, the prices. So I started just kind of get the hard figures. And then once I had my business plan, I'm like, yes, I rock. Let's go look at some spaces. And then you call places and nobody calls you back. So then I learned that unless you're a broker, the other brokers that have the spaces don't really give you the time of day, probably because they don't know if you're serious or not. And so a friend of mine basically introduced me to somebody that probably is the biggest reason of why I'm even open. But they are called Pedal Consulting, and what they do is they're brokers, but then they also have this first location program for people like me who have zero idea how to do a brick and mortar lease. And they basically walked me through the entire thing, were with me all the way up until opening day. And I really credit them, because I think I would have jumped ship. I would have been like, I'm way in over my head. I don't know what I'm doing. But they're just amazing people. They're
That's
badass.
fantastic. And I
That's
mean,
what they
that's
are.
just a testament too to bravery and resilience. I
Yeah.
mean, starting a business is always an intimidating thing, but then to start something, it's not like you have an abundance of data to show you anything. Before you open like a chain or you do something like
Yeah.
that, there's information, there's
Correct.
resources for you. But when you start something that literally does not exist, it's intimidating. It's
Yeah.
it's
It
like,
is, and you
what am
can't
I
walk
doing?
around and ask, because, like I said, 8 out of 10 people don't know what it is. So all I
Yeah.
had to go on was the previous salt rooms that had opened in Charlotte, and truth be told, about 3 of them are now out of business, which doesn't seem like a very promising business. Um,
Mm.
but I think I had it in my head of, well, this is why I didn't go back. So maybe if I would just find the reasons why I didn't go back and change them into a reason why I would go back and create something like that, maybe we could have something sustainable. So it really was sort of just in my mind an idea of what I thought it should be. But you're right, I had no data. And my brother, who has an MBA and helped me with my business plan, he said, is there a market for this? And I said, I have no idea.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a good reason to start a business whatsoever.
Well,
But
it's hard to come into a market where there's nothing really like this. Like you said, the other places were missing things. And so it's hard to just know what a market wants. Sometimes a market doesn't know what it wants until you give it to them. And
right.
you're innovating, which separates you from a business person because now you're innovating something different.
And I would go to Asheville, drive 2 hours to go to this one room. And so a lot of what I implemented came from that salt spa.
Asheville is just so interesting because a lot of people in Charlotte, like the bathhouse, Asheville just seems a little ahead of the times with their health and wellness spaces.
Yes. I think you have
So
people who are
interesting.
just in general more open to different modalities in
Yeah.
general.
So Salt and Souls obviously kind of represents, you're coming from more of a Western medicine background, and this is definitely more of a holistic type of service. What does that blend look like, and how do you approach, people who are coming in and just have maybe never heard of this before?
Yeah, I think in pharmacy and any Western medicine profession, we are trained in school basically. If there's not a study, it doesn't exist. And then you go into the real world and you start to see, medicines alone, people say, is this a side effect? It may not be on the list of side effects, but there's a good chance that yes, that is causing that person a side effect because humans are individualized and we all react to things differently. And even holistic choices, one person can say acupuncture cured this, and another person with that same ailment can go try acupuncture and it doesn't help. So I always feel like you almost have to just keep trying until you find the one thing that works for you. And so when it came to salt therapy, it was challenging for me because I come from this background where I feel like I have to have statistics to prove whatever it is I'm selling is legit and exist. And yet, so much of holistic medicine, there are no metrics, there are no data. Although there are starting to be a lot more, they're even starting to look at meditation and measuring brain frequencies to
Yeah.
actually say there is
Yeah.
something that's changing. So it's changing a little bit. But the thing I liked about salt therapy is there are studies, there have been data. But once again, you're always going to have the one person that is like, oh, well, that didn't really help me, or the person that says, well, this is what it helped me with, and it's not on the list of benefits. So I take it with a grain of salt, no pun intended, but I did appreciate that salt therapy does have some studies and actual data to kind of back it up.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the studies that we wish would be done on different holistic treatments, they're not profitable treatments, and
Right.
so the studies don't get funded. So, can you tell us a little bit about what those studies prove and how salt therapy is beneficial?
Sure, yeah. I think the main thing is going back to the science of salt. So, salt in and of itself is antibacterial and anti inflammatory, meaning if you have a block of salt and you put a foot fungus on it, it's not going to live on the salt. Like, it actually cannot live on the salt. And then also, salt pulls moisture. So, when you have a salt shaker and you put rice in it because it clumps, that's because it's drawing moisture like out of the air. So what happens when it goes into your body, it's doing those same properties. But what they found is that it has to be a microscopic size to get into your lung. You can't just take table salt, snort it, and hope it's going to do something. It's got to be microscopic to get into your lung, but it will go deep and it will cleanse and it will clean and it will kill and it will pull out moisture and mucus. And so that's where a lot of the respiratory benefits come from. And then it does the same thing on skin. Because it's small, it can also penetrate into the skin. It's anti inflammatory, antibacterial. So a lot of conditions like eczema and rash are helped. But also, the machine that actually creates the salt it generates negative ions. And as we know, negative ions make you feel really good. So a lot of times people just sit in the room and they say, I just feel good. Like when you go to the beach and you're in the salty air and you say, I just feel good.
Yeah.
It's very, very similar to that. And I always like to talk about the history of how they even discovered that salt did this. And it came from the Polish salt mines. They realized those workers didn't have the same kind of respiratory issues as other miners. So
Wow.
they started to kind of find out why. And it turns out that in the salt mines, the environment has this microscopic salt. The miners were breathing it in. So they started to actually make spas inside of the salt mines for people. And then they ended up duplicating that in another room by building the halo generator, which could mimic that environment. It's just interesting. I don't know.
That's
I'm learning more and
fascinating.
more about
No,
salt even every day, just being around it. You're like, huh,
Yeah.
try
yeah, I
putting it on
mean,
the wall. It's,
seriously, that's very cool. I'd never heard anything about the, kind of like the Polish salt mines. That's
Yeah.
such a unique
And
story.
it's so interesting. There's so many benefits, like you said, like being around salt, but also just like consuming like
yeah.
quality salt.
I was going to say the Himalayan salt has minerals as well. So
Yeah.
it's not good
Yeah.
to inhale the minerals, but in general, consuming like through your body is also, it's good to do
Yeah.
the minerals.
And the interesting contrast is like, we've seen like the food pyramid and things like that, and doctors have they have just pivoted towards telling people that they should consume a lot less salt. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting that they're
But it's
trying to push a more, having less salt in your diet, and they're telling people salt is bad, but obviously anything large amounts is not good for you, but it serves its purpose in
Right.
moderation. It is very beneficial.
also like a testament to the quality, right? Like you can buy a Celtic sea salt or
Yeah.
a Himalayan salt or something that's really high quality, and that would obviously serve as like a natural electrolyte. Like I'll
Yeah.
put a little bit in my water, but you certainly can't buy the stripped of all of its
Yeah.
good quality salt and expect it to do the same thing for
Right.
you.
Well, and as you know, with like any kind of holistic care, even functional medicine, it's just gauged differently. In Western medicine, you're not told you're sick until you're in a certain range and you're already in the disease state, whereas functional medicine can tell you when you're out of balance. So even things like how much salt you take or is your cholesterol high, like there's
Yeah.
so much range where cholesterol is actually good for you. You need it. Salt, you need it. So it's very hard to kind of give these black and white answers to people about like
Yeah.
how much salt they need because there's so many variables that are going to affect that, like high blood pressure. However, this is the number one question that I get asked about the salt room if people with high blood pressure can enjoy the salt room.
Oh,
And the answer is yes, because you're not eating the salt, you're just breathing it in and it does not affect your body systemically. So it's just, like
So
I said, fascinating. If you go in and you feel better and your anxiety is dropped and your
yeah.
cortisol levels are dropped, and that's going to affect functionally your whole body. And I always approach everything just sort of with this, I don't know, gray scale, I guess is what I would call it. I really don't see a lot of things as black and white, only because when you've been in the medical field and you actually get people's um, personal testimonies to everything, you start to realize that people's testimonies really hold a lot of weight as far as what I kind of truly believe works or doesn't work, or what's
Yeah.
healthy or what's not healthy, because you can't always just look at numbers and in a book for the answers.
that's brilliantly said because, even so, I would go to my doctor, explain, I do not feel well. Like I am really tired. I was 26 years old. I'm now 28, but at the time I was 26. I'm like, you guys, I am exhausted.
Yeah.
I feel like I cannot make it through the day without a nap. That is not normal. Like I should not feel that way. And they said, well, everything looks good. Everything looks normal. I was like, it's not normal. I proceeded to go see
Right.
a naturopath who then, helped me on a journey that was different. But they said, your numbers look fine. But I could tell, I was like, I do not feel fine. There's something wrong. Turns out a lot of my habits and day-to-day choices, being on my phone late into the night, not sleeping well, certain things I was eating in my diet all played a role. And so, it's like eventually addressing all of that, I was able to change the trajectory of how I was feeling. But I think, often people go to their physician and they ask for assistance. And of course, they're like, no, everything looks great. Everything looks good. You should be fine. But it's not until you're too far down the rabbit hole.
Yeah,
But,
and I had heard that it takes 10 years for a disease to show up. So by the time you get a disease, and it shows up on a test, it's been in the works for almost a decade or more, which is kind of sobering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the reason why preventative care is just so important these days, especially just some some doctors just like to wait until the biomarkers are high enough where they can prescribe something. So if it's
Right.
not that high yet, they don't want to intervene because, preventative care is going to usually not get them anywhere. So it's interesting to see like, how many people are actually getting these diseases when a lot of them are preventable.
Right. And so many people, they actually want a pill to fix things. They
Yeah.
want to get prescribed something when they get to the
It's
doctor.
easier than the effort.
It is. Yeah, I had heard lately that it's something like high, like, I don't know, 85% of the diseases are lifestyle
Yeah.
issues, which is, once again, also sort of makes you go, gosh, what are we
Yeah.
doing? Where can we help people? And one of my jobs in pharmacy, I worked in a long-term care, so I was treating patients when they were in the residence home. So I was able to see where we're bringing our people at the end of their life on all these medications, and I felt like I couldn't help them then because it seems too late at that point.
Yeah.
But how can I help people to kind of benefit their well-being and hit them earlier in life? And when you're a pharmacist and you give people medications, 10 years later, they're not any healthier from the medications you've given them. Do you know what I mean? They,
Yeah.
Yeah.
unless they've changed some
Band-Aids.
lifestyle choices, it's just a band-aid. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
Sure.
interesting that now you're kind of getting the opportunity to, instead of, like you said, you were doing long term, you don't have the ability to go in and change someone's lifestyle at that point. It kind of just
Right.
is what it is. And now you have this opportunity where you get to be helping people and fix the preventative care system.
Yeah, and I think honestly there are a lot of people in medicine that are kind of making a shift to see the bigger picture. Um, you just got to find them.
So, do you have a favorite story or testimonial from a client or someone who's come in to Salt and Souls as like a win for salt therapy, like a favorite story?
Yeah, a couple of them that I wouldn't even expect, but just this week I had somebody come in and she said that she has rheumatoid arthritis, and she showed me her knuckles after her session. But she said before she came in, she couldn't even see her knuckles because they were so swollen. And she did a 45-minute session in the cave. And when I chimed them out for their time being done, I noticed that she was on the floor with her hands in the salt, like playing in the salt. But when she came out, she said the swelling had gone down and her knuckles, she could see her knuckles. And once again, that is not on the list. But I mean,
Yeah.
I can't say that, the salt didn't
You
help
can't
that.
deny. I mean, you saw her knuckles before, and then you saw her
Yeah.
moving
Yeah.
them after. I mean, that's
And then someone else came in 2 days in a row, but she said that she has had a deviated septum like most of her life, and she always has one side of her nostrils that's always congested. And after the 2 days, she woke up and was completely clear. And then she had a massage later that week and said that always when she's, face down on the massage table, she always gets congested, and she didn't on that time. So needless to say,
Wow.
she's in there at least once a week.
I mean, it's
Clear.
half of your nostril.
Yeah. But she
It's
said she's
plugged.
been using like Flonase and nasal spray every day, and she hasn't had to. So yeah, no,
Wow.
it's very rewarding, just because even as a pharmacist, when people come in and they say, I'm on an inhaler, I'm on an antihistamine, I'm on a nasal steroid, and I still have really bad allergy symptoms, like what else can I do? And before I knew about salt, it was just like, I don't know, a neti pot. Like, you start to
Yeah.
kind of just be like, try anything. So it is kind of really cool to watch people go in and come out and say, I can breathe or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That's amazing, especially for people, asthma, those types of things. I mean, that would probably change your life. It's like a
Yeah.
not. So, do people have to use their inhaler as much if they have asthma and they come in?
No, in fact, there was the lady who works for the company where I got the salt from. She
Mm-hmm.
has a son who's 11, but was diagnosed with really bad allergies at age 2, and they got one of the home kind of tents, and so you can do like a 20-minute session, and the son does it like twice a week and has since he was 2. And ever since, he has a rescue inhaler, but he doesn't ever have to use it. But as a
Wow.
child, he was on nebulizers and inhalers and
Yeah.
all those things. So I I do know what my takeaway is, but I mean, basically, like, you don't know till you try.
Imagine if parents knew, who are just struggling with their kids who have allergies, asthma. Like,
Eczema. And there's
I mean,
so
and
many
so there's a
kids.
tent that you can put in your home
There
and just
is, yeah, there's one that you can
Yeah.
buy. It's pretty pricey. It runs about
sure.
$2,500,
Yeah.
but if you're not going to go to the salt spa every day or twice a week or whatever, it might
Yeah.
be
But
worth
it's
it.
yeah, if you're going to the doctors a lot and getting a lot of things done, like that's a medical bill right there. Like
Hmm.
that could save you and
A lot
hopefully
of
heal
money
you.
in the long
Yeah.
term.
And I don't know if people know this, but a lot of insurances, just as they started to cover massages, are starting to cover halotherapy
Oh,
on your FSA and your HSA card. So
nice.
we're
That's wonderful.
actually set up to take the FSA and HSA cards. And you kind of
Wow.
have to just check with your insurance to see
Hmm.
where, they cover. Basically, we would try to run it. If it doesn't go through,
Yeah.
then they probably don't cover it. But
Mhm.
most insurances, if they do, they might require you to have just like a letter of medical necessity from your doctor just to have on
Hmm.
Sure.
hand, like keep that in your own personal records,
Yeah.
in case they ever audit what you've spent your money on. But yeah, I think that kind of opens the door because once again, coming from pharmacy, um, people are used to insurances covering their health care. And so when you go into functional medicine, as you know, those tests are
Yeah.
expensive and you can
Yeah.
easily start to rack up the bill if you start to go natural. So anytime I feel that insurances hop on board with either preventative care or just giving people alternative ways, whether it's a chiropractor or an acupuncturist or whatever, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah.
And
My tests were not covered.
yeah.
No, they are not
No, no,
usually.
no, no.
It's interesting that like salt can benefit the eczema, and I feel like now we have so many children that are struggling with eczema, and I do think it's because of the ingredients and the quality of ingredients in food nowadays,
Yeah.
especially in like the fruit snacks and whatever it is, the junk food.
Topicals too.
Yeah,
Hmm.
topicals, laundry detergent, the environment. There's
Everything.
just
Yeah.
chemicals, and a lot of kids. I've just like I follow the mom accounts, and kids are just like there's a lot of eczema outbreaks, and so it's interesting to see like the widespread of eczema. I think it's diet too, but it's interesting that this could be used as a remedy for that.
Yeah. Absolutely. You expose the skin to it. So if they're
Yeah,
younger and you can just, take off their shirt and their pants, have them in their diaper or their underwear and just let them get exposed to that salt.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
And I'm just curious. I mean, I'm anxious because once again, in pharmacy, the data, but when you get into practice, you kind of see the real world stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to be in this space to start seeing the real world stuff. I know the data through the Salt
Yeah,
Therapy Association and whatnot, but it really, the truth is more in the what actually works in the real world, and that comes from actual people's testimonies.
yeah,
So I love almost having the like front row seat to that. It's really
yeah. You're
fun.
Oh,
witnessing it firsthand. You get to see
Yeah.
these little miracles,
Yeah.
and that's like
Yeah.
a cool thing to be able to be a part of.
and they really are little miracles because you're actually helping people change their lives, like their quality of life. I mean, if you can't breathe half the time, that would be really
Right.
upsetting.
Yeah,
And I think any time that somebody finds, whether it's through salt therapy or any other modality, like
Mm-hmm.
anytime somebody finds like that thing that works for them, I mean, how wonderful is that when you're just like, oh, yes,
right.
we finally found what it was. And,
That's amazing.
with the salt mines kind of originating from Poland, Europe has been on board with this for a long time. I think the US and Canada were a little slower to the market. So Last I checked, maybe like a year ago when I was doing my research, there was only about 2,000 places in the US that offered like a salt room of sorts. Um, and then, that was growing, but most of them were even kind of more out west, which you can imagine.
Sure. That makes
Um,
sense.
so even now, I mean, it's coming around, but we're still kind of on the cusp of people learning that this is a option to
Yeah,
try.
that's incredible. So, Salt and Souls offers a few different types, right? You've got the salt booth, community salt cave, you have private salt rooms. What are the differences? What should people look for if they're looking to check you guys out?
Yeah. For me, the salt room experience, ironically, didn't have a lot to do with respiratory health, but more sort of like mental health, spiritual health, like just my
Hmm.
well being. Um, So that is where the whole salt cave became like a must because you can really take any room and turn it into a halotherapy by just putting a hole in the wall with the machine that blows the salt in the air. But I really wanted something that was immersive. So as soon as you walked in, your body just felt, whether it was the salt on the walls or the music that came out or the soft light that kind of just made you go, huh. And so the Salt Cave is sort of the epitome of the star of the show of what kind of my vision was, which really stems from any other place that makes these amazing salt caves that are just kind of this experience in a way, just aesthetically, not just the salt air coming out of the wall. So the Salt Cave is 45 minutes and it offers a group booking. So you may or may not be in there with people but I always say it's like going to a movie. Everybody's going in there. It's kind of dark inside. You're sitting next to people, but nobody's
Mhm.
really talking. So it doesn't really feel weird to be lying in a room with strangers, just relaxing. But if you're not really up for that and you would really like to kind of have that same experience, but not have the chance to be booked with people you don't know, we have the private room. And that's why I did the private that looked similar so you'd get that same experience. But, not everybody is a community person or not everybody might feel like being a community person. So
Yeah.
that gives you the same exact 45 minutes, same kind of option. And then the booth comes along for a 10-minute session. And the reason why you can do it in 10 minutes is it's just a much smaller space. So that salt is filling up that air right away. You're getting hit with it the second we turn on the machine. And I think that was really important to me because so many conditions like asthma or allergies, or even if you just feel a cold coming on and it's kind of recommended that you come 2, 3 times a week or even 2, 3 days in a row. But not everybody has 45 minutes to just decompress. Whereas at 10 minutes is kind of an easy way to get in, get the halotherapy and kind of go. And it's also a great option for kids because they can usually hang anywhere for 10
For
minutes
10
and then they
minutes.
get that therapy as well. um, the main difference with, you can still kind of do it. I've had people go into the 10-minute booth and they play on the floor and close their eyes and do a 10-minute meditation, but the 45-minute is where you really get that parasympathetic system kicking in, so you will get more of the kind of relaxing and dropping of the cortisol levels in that 45-minute session, but you still can get huge benefits in that 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That's
The rooms are
amazing.
stunning, by the way. It really just
Thank
looks,
you.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
you would not know where you're at. Like it
You
just looks
don't.
stunning.
And that was by design. Like
Yeah.
it's intended so that when you walk in, you really don't feel like you're in this world anymore. Because I feel like everybody has the ability to heal themselves. Like our bodies innately know how to do that.
Yeah.
But a lot of times our heads just won't get out of the way.
Yeah.
So
And mindset is such a huge part
mindset
though.
is such a huge part. So I
Yeah.
feel like anything that can kind of just encourage the body to do something without us thinking about it. And that's kind of what this room does, whether it's the frequency in the room or the energy of the room or the salt, just sort of like with the negative ions, your body walks in there and you can't not respond to it with kind of like a, so
Yeah.
Wow.
that's kind of it was designed by
Zen.
purpose for
Very
that.
zen it sounds.
Yes.
So, something that you mentioned, right? It's, if you have a cold coming on or you feel like something, respiratory is happening, sinus related. I assume this would absolutely help with that then.
It does. In fact, there's a whole, it's called respiratory hygiene, and it kind of comes along from like you guys were saying, we are exposed to so much in the environment that we cannot control. Whether it's stuff in the air, whether it's stuff in our products, whether it's stuff on our food. So it's this idea that our lungs are constantly having to clean out just what we are living in. So the salt is almost like this, it's like a cleaner because it's killing stuff and it's pulling out the moisture. And then it also, through this kind of cascade of events, it's also triggering your immune system to kind of kick in. So even just being in the salt room boosts your immune system. So when you go in there, for me, when I have like congestion coming on, the more the congestion sits, the more of an environment you have for the bacteria to just have a party. So it's better to just kind of get it out, and that's what the salt will do. A lot of times in the booth, especially, people, there's Kleenexes in there because it will make your nose run, and they'll almost feel like they're getting worse because they're like, why is this normal for your nose to run and I have to blow my nose? You're like, yes, this is good. This is good. And so for me, when I'm feeling a cold coming on, partly is getting the congestion out. The second part is just to boost the immune system. And the third part is it will take your body and decompress it for just a minute so that you can kind of fight and do its thing.
That makes sense.
I enjoy that. Well, I'm going next time I get a cold.
So Jenna, we didn't ask you this, but now I'm like seeing it on your shirt, Salt and Soul. So like, what does this name mean to you? It sounds like there's just something behind that.
There is. We played with a lot of like alliterations because I always love like a good alliteration. Like we need salt with S. And for me, it was more just than the salt. The salt is an amazing vehicle, but really for me, it was about the overall mind, body, soul. So when I went to look to see what was available, saltandsoul.com was taken, but Souls wasn't. But when I started to think about it, I was like, no, that's what this is about. It was kind of just about getting souls into the space. It's about healing souls. It's about helping souls. It's about relaxing souls through salt. But that's kind of where the name, it just really resonated with me.
Having now talked to you for
it makes sense.
This amount of time, I can just really see that radiating from, like, you're very passionate about this, and that definitely translates.
Yeah, I'm very passionate, I think, about having a healing space for people because, gosh, we need it. Everybody needs it, and it's so hard to, it's so hard to just get out of your head, I think, more than anything, to just be, like, calm. Or I just need to, love myself or whatever it is that you need. I feel like the salt room will give you, whether it's through the actual properties of salt or whether it's just the calming space. But it's really been, like I said, rewarding to see people come out, especially of the cave. They're just like, wow. And that has made it worth it to me, just that reaction alone.
Where can people find you on social media?
So we're on Instagram at salt.and.souls. We're also on Facebook at Salt and Souls. Our website is www.saltandsouls. You can also email us at connect@saltandsouls. And that's, I think the Instagram and the website, those are the two places that probably get updated.
The Instagram will sell it because you have your
the
pictures.
Instagram is beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And we're throwing a lot of events out there, so it's been fun. Basically anything that you think is amazing, just think to yourself, what could make it even more amazing? And the answer is put it in a salt cave. So we're going to try it.
So what kind of events do you guys have coming up?
We have sound bath in the cave every Wednesday. We do a deep stretch every Friday in the cave at 6:30. Both of those times are at 6:30. And then we've got some restorative yoga. We've got a couples massage day coming up on the 18th. So just a lot of different. We have a kids time called Little Zen Den for moms and kids, which will include a little bit of, we call it wiggle and flow, so they can move, because the more they move, the more they'll breathe, the better they'll get the salt in their lung, and then also in with the story time. So we're just going to try a lot of things and see what resonates with people.
We'll tag you in all of this. Everyone, go follow Jenna. If you live in Charlotte, go check out Salt and Souls. And Jenna, thank you so much for
Oh my
coming on
gosh,
and
thank you
sharing your
guys so
incredible
We had
much.
the
story.
best
Thank you.
time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.